Russia strikes a deal to end an armed insurrection by a mercenary group over the weekend. Joining us in studio is Dr. Richard Sindelar, the director for the Center for International Studies at the University of St. Thomas, to talk more about the stunning series of events. Good morning to you. Thanks for being here.
Good morning, Melissa.
Can you get us up to date, in case anybody was relaxing over the weekend, maybe not watching the news, of what sparked all this in the first place? Things were really heating up over the weekend.
It seems like the Russian Defense Ministry under Sergei Shoigu, the defense minister, was seeking to bring the Wagner group within the orbit of the defense ministry so they can control them. Prigozhin, the leader of Wagner, was against that, so he marched on the command center for the Southern Command, which controls the Ukrainian action, and also began a march, what's called a flying column, headed toward Moscow. Eventually a deal was struck, so he gets to go into exile in Belarus, and his troops return to their bases, and supposedly everything's okay in Russia, except it's not really.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, obviously Putin is weakened, although my personal opinion is he probably won't fall anytime soon. The Russians are trying to paint it as business as usual. Shoigu was shown visiting troops. Putin was at an engineering conference making a presentation today, but he's much weaker. Wagner is still in its bases or returning to its bases with its equipment, and this morning the FSB, the Internal Security Organization, said no, they're not done investigating Prigozhin. So you've got a wild card with a still armed group and a guy who's being reneged on the deal by the Russians, so it could get really interesting in the next few days.
How does all of this impact the war in Ukraine and everything that was going on over there anyway?
Well, so far, actually, the Russian troops in Ukraine for the last 48 hours have been fighting just as pretty much they have in the past. Not brilliantly, but at least holding their defensive lines against small Ukrainian advances. But you wonder about the morale of those troops, their conscripts. Will they still stick it out when they know things are bad back home? Do you want to die in the trenches when even the leaders can't get their act together?
Have you heard how the White House is responding to all of this? Because we know that there have been talks between President Biden and Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky. Any word from the White House at this point?
They are playing it very low key because they don't want the Russians to once again play the card that somehow NATO's behind everything. So the more we say, the more it looks like NATO is behind this. Talk with Zelensky was probably a buck him up sort of call. We're behind you, we're right here, remembrance that they're still getting F-16s, but probably no big breakthroughs in that.
Well, with you saying that there could be some big changes in the coming days, you need to stay in touch with us, keep us up to date with what's going on, and perhaps we'll be checking back in with you to see what's going on.
Happy to do so, Melissa.
Sounds like this is just the beginning of a lot to come.
Could be very interesting.
All right, Dr. Sindelar, thank you for taking time for University of St. Thomas. Always an honor to talk to you.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your expert opinion.